Hey everyone, J-Rod Plays here, just bringing you guys the guide for the bridge now that I finally got through the encounter, got all the footage I need to kind of show the specific mechanics and the way that we did it. It's probably, to me, the most simple, straightforward way. There is some ways that are maybe a little less reliant on people to not die, because with this way you have to just not die, like play your life, make sure that you're taking advantage of situations where you don't have to always be on the totems and understanding how the totems work. I'm going to go through all of that as well, so that way every team that goes in that sees this video should be able to easily get across, especially too if you have some people who are adept at strand flying across. It wasn't necessary, it just helped us move things along quicker, getting people across the bridge sooner, but then the person would have to come back anyways, so it's not required. The team setup that we used was 4 people on the plate and then 2 people on the pillars. And the reason why you have to have 2 people on the pillars, for those that are new to this encounter, is that when you're somebody standing on the center platform building the bridge, the 2 totems will activate and turn red and start screaming. If you allow them to continue in that fashion, they're going to end up wiping the team. And so you have to have 2 people stay in place with their feet in that blue area that's glowing below them that turns red. And you don't have to always be on it, you just have to keep touching it and prevent it from fully turning red so that it doesn't wipe your team, because there's a point at which it runs away and kills your team. So now that we know the composition, the person that has the chalice will usually be the one kind of helping side to side, because not everybody is adept at taking a plate and not dying by themselves when they're on the plate. So what I was doing is, when I was taking the chalice to the plate people, and when somebody else taking the chalice to the plate people, you would notice on the footage they're going over and they're helping them clear their anti-barrier, or their barrier champ, should I say, and their sword bearers. You probably want to kill the first sword bearer, because he can be a little bit annoying for the people on the pillar if they're having trouble kiting him. So we just kill him outright, because of the way that we're building the bridge and the way that we're passing the buff around our setup. It takes longer, so you don't need to worry about accelerating the bridge. You just have to activate it the first time, and then by the time you've got everybody enlightened, which is what we're doing, the bridge will be pretty much built, if not all the way built already, depending on how long it took you guys. And so again, the key now that what we're doing is we're picking up the chalice. And the way the chalice works, for those who haven't seen anything before, and this is your first time experiencing, you're jumping straight into the bridge encounter, is that the chalice will give you a small little bar on the left. That bar grows as you're getting kills, and it also slowly grows over time on its own. Initially, it was thought that it would have to move around like centrifuge, but it's actually going to grow on its own, regardless of if you're moving or not. It just speeds up when you get kills. And so now that you know the chalice is full, when that happens, you're going to get a timer, and that timer is going to count down. It's actually a little longer. I thought it was like 7 seconds. It's actually 10 seconds, and then it starts at 9. And so from there, you have that time for somebody to come take the chalice off you, or you'll die when the timer reaches 0. When that person takes the chalice from you, you gain enlightenment, and that person then begins filling the chalice. That person then will get the same timer and then pass it along again. Now what we were doing is we were giving the chalice to one person first, who was actually going to strand fly across, so that he would get the enlightenment, and then he would strand fly across early. He would throw the tangle and then grab the tangle and yank him over to the other side, and then he would end up standing on top of a pillar on the other side safely, shooting down at the adds at the ground level. So he was kind of keeping the adds clear. Then what we were doing was we were passing it to the pillar people next, so they were the priority. So if for example, you don't have somebody strand flying, give it to the pillar people first. That way they have less stress on them trying to come get the chalice. You go take it to them, you help them kill their barrier champ, and then you help them kill the sword bearer if it comes out. You know, drop some healing on them if you have healing for them. Just help them stay alive. Use your super. Don't hold on to your super. That's another issue that I see with LFGs, is that they're holding on to their supers and their heavy ammo like they're not going to get it again. You will get your super again. You will get more heavy. Just use it. Stay alive. Do whatever you can. Don't die holding a super. Don't die with a full heavy ammo clip. If you feel like you're about to die, bust out the heavy and go to town. Now we have the 2 people on the totems enlightened, so now we're going to move back to the initial 4. And so out of the initial 4, you'll have one person grabbing it again, getting enlightened, and then passing it around to the other 2 remaining, because one of the initial 4 is already across. Now if you don't have somebody strand fly across, then you're still going to have your 4, and you're still going to pass it along, and by the time it reaches the 4th person, that 4th person is now the chalice holder and the final one. His job is to take the chalice across with the first sword. And so the person that grabs the sword is the person that's confident that they're going to live with the sword. Whoever it is, it doesn't need to be a specific person as far as in the order. It could be anyone that's already enlightened, that's strong with the sword, that knows that if they go over, they're not going to get themselves killed. And that's the person you want to send over first with the chalice person. What the chalice person is doing is they're booking it all all the way across, straight ahead, and as they get over the bridge, what they're going to notice is they're going to see a small podium, just like the other podiums that we were depositing in the other encounters, and the podium itself is separate from the podiums in which you place the swords. And so there's going to be like podiums around the pillars where you deposit the sword once you've killed your knight, but there's going to be a singular podium that I show here between the two doors. That's where you can preserve the chalice. And so that chalice bearer is going to run over there, preserve the chalice. If it's a warlock, even better, because the warlock can either freeze the sword knights on the other side, or they, which are called the gatekeepers, by the way, to be specific, they can freeze the gatekeepers, and then they can drop a well, and then you can kill the gatekeeper in the well, or you can kill the gatekeeper while frozen, while the other person who brought the chalice over, that person is going to help clear ads. And so now that person is helping clearing ads, you kill the gatekeeper with your sword, and then you're going to deposit it in one of the small podiums that are designed for swords. Once you've done that, it's actually going to take your enlightenment away, and this is important just in case somebody dies on the other side. But at this point, for us, we had somebody strand fly over, we had somebody come over with the chalice, and we had somebody come over with the sword. Now we're set to do the second part of the bridge. So we're going to actually have the people that are on the front part come off of the center plate. Now the center plate again activates the totems. If nobody's standing on the center plate, the totems don't need to be stood on. And so that person comes off of the center plate, and the people come off the totems, and they're going to come and hide at the top of the staircase. And I'll show what it looks like when you're hiding at the top of the staircase, killing the barrier champions and killing the sword bearer. And so now you know that you're going to be just trying to stay safe. Your job, now that you've been left behind and the other three people are building the bridge on the other side, is to stay alive, don't die, don't do anything stupid, use your super, don't make them come back for you. I will talk about that once I get done with some of the mechanic changes, how to rescue somebody dying across, because you have to actually bring the chalice back in order to get them enlightened again so they can come across. So I'll discuss that, but in this case, you want to make sure that if you are on the side left behind, that you're doing everything you can to survive. You're not going to hold your team down, right? That's your job. Don't hold my team down. Let me make sure I get my sword and get across. You have to have a total of 5 swords across. So if you have somebody strand, that leaves you with a predicament of having to get one more sword. And so again, I'll go into that once we get everybody across. So now going back to the other side of the bridge with the 3 people. So while that's happening on the first side of the bridge, what the 3 people that have already crossed over's job is now to do is to build the bridge. And so you're going to have one person stand in the center, and that person is going to hold down the center plate, and then you're going to have one person on the pillar on each side holding down the plates, keeping those totems from activating and killing the team. And so now you have the team that's building the bridge across the way, waiting on the team that's getting swords and coming over. And the way that the swords continue to respawn is, as a person gets a sword, they're going to come over, they're going to fight a gatekeeper, and then what you will do as a person that's on that other side is to use your abilities. In our case, we were using stasis, and we were using it to great effect. You would bring the gatekeeper toward the front of the bridge, kind of where the plates are, and they would freeze up there, and you would either put a rift down and kill them in the rift, put a well down, kill them in the well, or you could technically help them push them off the edge if you wanted to. That we saved for the final bits of Guardians. We were actually killing our gatekeepers by freezing them and just hitting them with the sword. And that's a big deal. Having that stasis there is going to make this a whole nother encounter, because the gatekeepers will only hit you periodically every now and then, giving you time to go and heal. And if you actually have stasis yourself, one thing that I found out that was new to me getting it done today is that you can actually use your grenade. I thought because the abilities were grayed out that you couldn't use your grenades, but you can. So for me, when I went over with the sword, I was actually able to hold the sword and throw a stasis turret shown here, so I was able to freeze my own gatekeeper, and then the person that went with me was a warlock as well who dropped a well, so I was able to do the damage to the gatekeeper, get back in the well, damage the gatekeeper, get back in the well, and even when he was not in the well, he was a little bit away from the well, he was frozen from my turret, so he was an easy target for me. I just kind of hit him with the heavy attack over and over again, and he fell over. And so now that we're doing this one at a time, and we're killing these gatekeepers one at a time, you're going to get to a point where the final person is going to come across the bridge. What actually happened is that we found out that when the final person comes across the bridge, if one person is not enlightened over there still, it's going to spawn another sword bearer on the other side of the bridge to prevent you from getting stuck and locking the encounter. So you actually get a sword on that side, you kill that sword bearer, then you kill that gatekeeper, and then you have that 5th sword deposit. So you don't actually have to come back always. But if somebody dies, you do. So what do you do if somebody dies? And so I'm going to show here the situation where somebody died, I pick up the chalice, and I come back because, again, I'm not enlightened anymore. Once you actually deposit the sword after you've killed your gatekeeper, it takes your enlightenment from you. You can pick up the chalice again. and the chalice is going to be sitting in the little podium that's in the center by the two doors waiting for you. And so you pick that up, you run back across the bridge, you go and get the res, and then what's going to happen is you're going to give that chalice to the person that you just resurrected. That resurrected person is going to then take the chalice and immediately book it back across the bridge, because they don't need to be there anymore. They don't have enlightenment, they have the chalice, they can't have the chalice stuck on that side. If they wait long enough, they're going to die. So their responsibility is to take the chalice from you and go on across the bridge. You stay back. If you're the person who's confident, you kill the sword bearer, and then you bring the last sword over. Now you got the last sword over. The person who's not enlightened will spawn another sword bearer. You kill that sword bearer, kill the gatekeeper, and then boom, now you're in the next phase. You're going to end up getting the barrier champs spawning, you're going to end up getting the ogres spawning, and then after you've killed the ogres and the barrier champs, there's a lot of them, so it takes a little while, you're going to end up getting a wave of gatekeepers. I want to say there's 5 because 5 swords. And normally what you would do is you would then spend time spinning the chalice between each other, spreading the chalice between each other. They can pick up the sword after being aligned, so pick up any of the save swords, and then that last person can then go and preserve the chalice into the podium there in the center of the doors. Now the way that we did it is that we kited the gatekeepers all the way to the front, to the 2 small round pillars that are right outside of the bridge. And what you want to try to avoid doing is standing too long in the center platform. You don't want it to activate accidentally and start the totems up. So you kind of dance around the center platform, around those 2 round pillars. And the 2 round pillars that you're dancing around, you're going to freeze the knights there. So we had a couple of stasis warlocks that were dropping their stasis Bleakwatcher turrets. And again, that's what we were dropping, was Bleakwatcher turrets. We were using Osmiomancy gloves with the Cold Snap grenade. And those Bleakwatcher turrets are then freezing these knights, and these knights are then easy targets. If you don't have a sword, it's actually easy for you to just walk up right to them and push them to the edge little by little. And so the way that you do that is that if you're a warlock like us, we were just putting down a healing rift and pushing them little by little, and if they hit us, we would just go stand in the healing rift, get our health back, and then keep pushing them, because they would get frozen over and over again. And then you would push them little by little until they tip over. Now, I accidentally made the mistake the first time of tipping him over, and I was getting all cocky like, goodbye, gatekeeper, and I fell off with him. So that was a nice, funny moment. But if you're a hunter, for example, you can do that. As a hunter, you can fall off, and then you can get height back to get your jump back up. If you're a Titan, maybe you might be able to get yourself back up as well, especially if you have a little bit of a running start and you can shoulder tackle yourself back on. But as a Warlock, if you have momentum downward, you're going down. So there's nothing I could do in that case. I just had to get rezzed. But you want to try to leave it to your hunter teammates to do the pushing, since it's easier for them to get back on if they fall off. If you don't have any hunters, just take your time and be easy with it. And if you're really, really unconfident that you feel like you can't push these guys off without falling over and dying with them, then just do it the proper way. Just freeze them, get the sword after you get the chalice buff, stow the chalice back into the podium so that you have it for later, and then just sword kill your gatekeepers. And they're not going to be that much of a threat because they're going to be frozen. You should still have your warlock with the well if you had a well warlock to pop a well. You can also pop rifts and fight them in the rifts. So they're not a big threat once you got stasis turrets down and you're starting to freeze them up. And that's going to be the best way that I can recommend doing it. You can also use Strand Suspend. Kind of has the same effect, just doesn't last as long, and you may not be able to do it as often. But Strand Suspend is great. It also works when you're holding the sword. You can throw your Suspend grenade, your Shackle grenade, and it'll suspend enemies for you. And so that's the basic encounter mechanics. Once you go through those steps and you get them all right, that's the way that we got it done. And so now I'm just going to go through some of the breakdowns in this mechanic and where things can fall apart as an LFG, because this is going to be one of those surviving LFG videos, because of the fact that we had to kind of get everybody together and try to get everybody who's strangers to each other to play coordinated. Not always easy with LFGs, and people know that. And that's kind of part of why I posted these videos, because I want to make sure to help people who struggle with LFGs, who are a solo player like me, for example, try to get this hard in-game content done and not have to struggle as hard as you possibly would if you didn't have these tips and tricks and you didn't have these things that you can do to change things. And so again, for the guide's pretty much over. If you've watched this far, I really appreciate you guys sticking around. This is going to be for people who have already kind of struggled at the bridge and still need that a little bit of additional call outs, like, hey, these are the things to look out for. And so for me, What I had to do to make sure this was accomplished is I had to make sure I was covering people as well. So I was doing my job, I was paying attention to the chalice, I was trying to keep everybody in order, and I was also keeping the people that were on the totems alive by making sure that I shred their barrier champs. When the barrier champs came out, I made sure I had ice down to freeze them. I made sure I was hitting them with the wish ender. My loadout was wish ender with a grenade launcher and a machine gun, a heavy machine gun. And so the machine gun was for when I needed to really burn through health, and also for when I was getting overwhelmed with stuff. The Wish Ender, of course, was my major damage dealer, and it gave me the range to do the damage, so I could do it from wherever I was standing. It would also be helpful to see when the knights were coming out, or when the barrier champions were coming out, because you can see the barrier champions through their spawn point, so you know when it's time. From there, I was running, of course, Osmiomancy gloves. I was using the grenades to the best effect. I was running grenade kickstart. I was running the impact induction with the one where you do the melee and you get your grenade energy back from doing the melee to even feed my grenades. And so I was making sure that I had everything, pushing my grenades to the point where they could be spawning as much as possible. So obviously max discipline, and then you want to hit your resilience. You want to make sure you're 100 resilience, and then recovery is next, depending on your gear level. And so once you've got your build set up, and once you know that you're going to cover these totems, the next thing you're going to do is make sure that in the order that you're always available to try and save the situation. And so, like, if I needed to pick the chalice up, I made sure that I was available to do so. If I needed to grab the sword and go over first, I was going to grab the sword and go over first, because I knew what to do. After watching this video, you'll know what to do. And so you'll be hopefully the confident one that's going to say, fine, I'll go with the sword first. When you get across with the sword, your main goal is to get your ice out if you're running the exact class as me. And if not, make sure somebody gets ice out for you. Make sure that somebody's getting a well down for you, or a healing rift down for you, and somebody else is with you there to make sure that they're killing the boomer knights. Controlling the boomer knight is big, so when I wasn't working on the gatekeeper, I was killing the boomer knight, because the boomer knight is a problem. It'll just start spamming that arc to you, and even with double, triple arc resist, you're still going to get wrecked. So I was making sure that if I got hit once by the knight, I was out of there. If I had health, I was killing the boomer knight, then killing the gatekeeper. And so that's how I did my portion of the job when it comes to getting across and making sure that the totem people were not dying. And that applies to both sides. I was actually keeping an eye on the other totem person and the middle person too. If they were getting overwhelmed, I was making sure to help them. I was watching their ads, not so much as blindly killing and kind of going mindless with your killing. I was making sure that the things that I killed were precise, and they were there to protect the people that they were pushing. I wasn't going to let anybody fight alone if I could avoid it, because I wanted to make sure that we didn't have any unnecessary deaths, because we needed those reses later on, especially when I fell off the edge. So, it's not always you're protecting themselves for their sake. You're protecting them also for your sake if you're a solo raider and you're trying to get through this. So another breakdown, of course, is people dying on the other side of the bridge. So again, what you do there is, if you're the confident one, you go and you grab the chalice. You should have already sorted your knight. You should have already deposited your sword, so your gatekeeper's dead and your sword's in its podium. Then you have no more enlightenment, so you can go and you can pick up the chalice. You run over, you get the person that you rezzed. You come back with the sword. You let them come back with the chalice. If everybody else over there is good, then they stay back and they continue to bring swords over. If somebody over there has lost somehow, if there's like 2 deaths, for example, and you do chain reses, then you're going to do a 2 pass. So you're going to be one sword bearer carrier. The other person that took from you is going to also be a sword carrier, and that final person that gets rezzed is going to be the one that brings the chalice back with you guys to the other side, so that you can push to the next phase. And so that's going to be how you control the situation as best of your ability, right? Because you can't make everybody play well, but you can play well enough that you cover 2 or 3 people. And the way you do that is because you think ahead. You're not just mindlessly shooting things. You're like, what am I prioritizing? Let me prioritize the barrier champs. Let me prioritize protecting this person by dropping him heals. Let me prioritize where the knights spawn and make sure I'm killing the barrier knights. And so those are going to be the things that are going to make the difference for your team and get you past this encounter. So now that you've gotten everybody across, and now that everybody's there, and you've killed that final sword barrier, and you've deposited your 5th sword, don't forget that you're going to also have a bunch of barriers spawning in. You're going to have wizards spawning in, so make sure you prioritize the wizards, because they will surprise you and kill you very quickly. And then you're going to have your 2 big ogres that are really chunky. I just froze the ogres. I used my super. I made sure that they couldn't really hurt anybody. I kept them in their corner. And then from there, once you do that, then it's time to move on to the 5 knights that come out and how you handle the 5 knights. So now that we've kind of covered all the stuff that can go wrong, we've already kind of covered the way to do it properly. That's pretty much going to be the most knowledge that I can provide for teams that are struggling. And you want to make sure that you designate somebody, if you have the ability to kind of keep an eye on things, if somebody's good at multitasking, and allow that person to kind of play team captain. You don't have to call them captain if you don't want to breed jealousy or whatever, but there's usually somebody that you're going to want to rely on, like getting people in order. And so if you have somebody like that in your group, give them that opportunity. If they're good and they're not like an ass about it, let them kind of keep things in order, let them keep things organized. And if you're the confident person, you should be the one to speak up respectfully, of course, but say, hey, I got this, I'll do this in this situation, I'm fine doing that, I'm comfortable being solo and doing the last sword, for example. I'm comfortable holding down the totem for everybody so that nobody dies on these totems. And so if you know that you're good at this particular role, you want to take that role and speak up and say, hey, I'm good doing this and I can handle this too. And I'll back you up for this case. And so that's kind of the attitude that I would say to have. And I'm sure once you watch this video and you get everybody organized in the same way, you do all the enlightenment first, make sure nobody dies, because again, if you die while you're trying to pass out the enlightenment first, it throws everybody off. And then if you get too far behind, 2 or 3 or 4 deaths, just don't waste time, wipe it up, start over, forget that happened, and move on to the next one. So thanks very much again for all the recent support. I say it in every video, but it's been really crazy the last few days. I really appreciate everybody showing their support and feedback in the comments. Providing additional assistance in the comments, like, hey, try this, hey, try that. That's always great, because even though I may not have it in the video and somebody may say, well, what else can I do? I've done these things, I'm still having trouble. Those additional little tips do help. And I appreciate that. And I know like some people may say, oh, they're going to take it personal that I'm giving these tips. I don't care. If you have some additional tips and you think this will work, throw it in there. I don't mind reading it over, and I'm sure somebody else that sees that information and can use that information really is thankful for it as well. And again, appreciate all the new subscribers. If you've gotten this far as well and you haven't been subscribed yet, I'd appreciate your subscription as well. I'm just glad that we're all helping out each other. That's my favorite thing around day one raids, is getting in like raid secrets and seeing everybody posting stuff and helping give others that little bit of push that they need and that little bit of extra information so they can get their clear done. And instead of being kind of crabby about it and saying, no, I don't want as many people to clear, let's make sure that we get as much people clear of Crota's in raids so they can get to the Necrochasm, so they can have all the cool stuff with us. Hopefully even get their emblem. If it's like one of those long shots that you get a bunch of random people get together, they knock out the challenges, which aren't too bad. The only one is probably Crota that I'd see people really struggling on. The other 3 are really doable. And again, I'll see you guys in the next guide, and I look forward to helping you guys for the rest of the raid encounters.